everyone, welcome back to Rima Reads. So today I'm going to go through my December wrap up, and I read 13 books in the month of December. Woo! I have not read that many books in a month in so long, and I am so proud of myself. Even though Team Charlie Brown came in last place for this readathon, it wasn't because we were bad. It was because all of the other teams were insane in their reading page count. So like, I'm so proud of our team, and I am proud of how many books I read, and so I'm very excited to talk to you guys about these books. The first book I read in the month of December is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by B.E. Schwab. Like, everyone knows about this book. It's so popular, it's so hyped, and it's for a good reason. So this book is about Addie, who basically makes a deal with like a devil demon guy to get immortality, but he like sneaks in a little curse in there such that she is not remembered by anyone in the world. So basically she's lived like 300 years, but no one can remember her. And then all of a sudden she meets a boy who can remember her. I did not expect to love this book as much as I did, because I'm not like the biggest like, oh my god, romance reader. Like, I like romance in my book, but I'm very picky on how it's done. And obviously just based off of that premise, you can kind of assume that this book is heavy on the romance, but I really, really loved it. Addie is a character who like generally, truly just loves being alive and loves people, and it's just so amazing to see her character, even though she's like suffered so much, like no one can remember her. That's like horrifying, but she like still loves being alive, and you get that through like every page in this book. You can see how much she just loves people and how desperate she is to be loved in return. And so the love story in that sense made complete sense to me on why these two characters are drawn together so much, and I thought it was beautiful. And I really loved the message about Addie always surviving and always fighting and just loving life. It definitely, like, the vibe of this book is definitely like an indie artsy film, which also is not my style at all, but I really enjoyed it. Like, I just love that this book is just so filled with love. You know what I mean? I think if you're someone who doesn't like slow books, this might be a struggle for you, because it is quite slow, as a lot of it is repetition on like Addie's life throughout the 300 years, and the plot doesn't really move too much, but it is much more about characters and people. And so I think if you like Addie as a character, you're gonna love this book. And so I liked Addie as a character, so I love this book. So I ended up giving this book 5 out of 5 stars because it's just so delightful, and like Addie's so resilient, and it's just so filled with love, and I enjoyed it greatly. So 5 out of 5 for Addie LaRue. So the next book I read in December is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This is a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in 1926 Shanghai, and it also has like this monster plot because there's this monster out here killing people. Juliet is Chinese, daughter of the leader of the Scarlet Gang, and Romeo, whose name is Roma in this book, is Russian, and he is the son of the leader of the White Flower Gang. And when they were younger, they fell in love. Then some shit went down, bad stuff. They broke apart. Juliet went off to America, and then this takes place when she has come back to Shanghai. And right around the time she arrives, there's this monster that's like killing off people in these horrid ways, of them like cutting their own throats. And Juliet and Roma decide to investigate these killings because neither of their families are super interested in them. So this book is part mystery, part gang war, part romance, and I thought it was good. I personally really liked Juliet as a character. She is Chinese, but she's gone off to America and studied there, and she's coming back, and she talks a lot about like feeling like a bit of a foreigner even in her own country due to her American education, but she also talks a lot about like colonization. At this point in history, Shanghai has been open up to a lot of like foreigners. Juliet's perspective on all of what's happening is really, really interesting. I enjoyed hearing about her thoughts on like what's going on in her country, and I thought her like thoughts on the struggle of being a person in a land that's being colonized and taken over by all of these foreigners, and trying to find her identity in all of this, and trying to like save her gang and preserve their way of life was super, super interesting. And so I really liked Juliet as a character. I also really liked there was a good amount of diversity in this book. There was a trans character in this book. There were some LGBT couples in this book, and so I really enjoyed the diversity in here. But I did not care for Roma. I mean, Juliet, they gave such a complex like characterization and backstory, and then for Roma, I was like, I don't care about these Russians. Like, you're not giving me anything to work with here, boy. So I didn't care for him, and therefore I did not care for their love story. Also, the pacing of this book was really weird. It was fast-paced at some points, like they put the plot, they introduced like the monster and the plot and them meeting really, really quickly, but then it was slow in other places that I was just like, get a move on, we don't need all of this backstory. And so I enjoyed it, but I wouldn't say it was like amazing or anything like that. I do really like this author. I mean, it's her debut novel, and I wanted to support her, and so I'm really glad I read this book. But I will say it was probably a 3.5 stars for me, because it could have been much, much better. But I think a lot of the faults are because it's an author's first novel. The next book I read in December was Better Allies. This book was not part of my readathon. I just wanted to finish it pretty early in the month for work, and I thought it was great. I thought it had so many good actionable steps that you can take to be an ally in the workplace. I find that a lot of books that talk about allyship and diversity don't give you like concrete steps on what to do. Like, they tell you why it's important, and that's kind of it. You don't get that, well, here are things I can do outside of education to be a better ally. And I thought this book had a lot of really good ones. Like, the first chapter gives concrete examples on what you can do in a workplace, like how to talk up in meetings, how to promote people of color or minorities in panels and things like that. And then the rest of the book goes on to talk more and more about how to be a good ally. I read Brotopia earlier this year, and Brotopia had like a lot of just like, here are horror stories in the tech industry, but other than that, it didn't really like say much on how to fix it. This book has a little bit of like, here are bad things that happen, but it talks more about like, here are things you can do to fix it, and I really like that. I do think that this book was geared toward white men and women in the workplace, so people who generally have privilege and power. And also, the author, being a white woman, talked a lot about like what she could do as a woman to get other women to the table. She did briefly mention intersectionality and people of color, but I think it could have done a little bit more on that point, how to improve lives of other minorities, not just women, which is touched on. It's just not touched on as much as I would like. And so overall, I really enjoyed this book. I give it a 4.5 stars. If you work in a corporate setting, this is a really good book to read. It's pretty quick too. You could gain some really good actionable steps on things you can do at work. The next book I read in December is The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Adrian. This takes place in Russia, and it is about this girl, Vasilisa. I don't know exactly how to pronounce her name. She is kind of like a witch. She can see her old gods. She can commune with them and has some sort of magic powers. And it is about her life in this like old Russian city as Christianity comes to it, and dealing with her new stepmother, who is also kind of can see all this stuff but is vehemently against it and into the Christianity life, while her family wants her to be, married off as expected for women of this time. I thought this book was beautifully written. Definitely gave those winter vibes if that's something you're looking for. But it was really not for me in terms of the storyline. I thought it was really, really slow. The last third of the book had all of the action and magic that I wanted in it, and then the first 2/3 were just backstory about her life from before she was born until she's 18, and just all the things she had to go through and all of her family members' lives. And I was just I don't care about any of this. The last third I enjoyed. I thought that was good, but the first 2/3 I just could not handle, and I thought it was so slow. And so I don't think it was really my style of book. So I ended up giving this book 3 stars because it wasn't a bad book. It was just not my style of book. The writing was beautiful and the vibes of the book are real nice, but it's not my style. So 3 stars. The next book I read in December is The Red Queen by Victoria Avard. This book is YA sci-fi dystopia fantasy novel where in this world people with silver blood have magical powers, and there's all of these different factions based on what kind of power they have. The magic system's really, really cool. And so in this world, these people with silver blood are the ruling class, and people with red blood are kind of oppressed in this society. They are either forced, if they are able to, they get to work on a trade. Otherwise, they are forced to fight in this long, long war that no one really knows too much about, except that it's horrible. So our main character is Mare. She's spunky YA protagonist, and she ends up getting this job at the castle, and she accidentally performs magic in front of everyone. She had no idea she could do this, and she is in fact red-blooded. And so shit goes down. And so to figure all of this out, the Silvers, the people in charge, pretend that she's the long lost daughter of another noble, and her whole world is flipped upside down, as now she has to play this role of being a noble for this society that has oppressed her and her people for so long. This book, I immediately picked it up and I hated it. It was really bad. I read 50 pages and then I was maybe I should DNF it, because I don't know, the writing style was first person, not that good. It was just so typical YA that I just could not handle it. So I put it down for a day, and I was trying to find other books that have crowns on it, and then I was whatever, I'm just gonna read this because I need to for my readathon. So then I picked it up with 0 expectations, and then I really liked it because it was bad, but it was also really fun to read. Once I had 0 expectations, it was a fun read, because then I got to just ignore the bad writing and just be ooh, what's gonna happen to Mare? Why does she have 3 men who are in love with her? Yeah, she has 3 men, so much higher than the regular typical YA protagonist of 2 men. So I was ooh, spicy. And the magic system was pretty cool, so I was fun, and I had a good time being who's evil, who's not, what typical YA things is this character going to do? And so I'm sorry for people who like this series, because I get it. I feel I'm just not into this type of genre anymore of YA dystopia novels. So I ended up giving it 3 stars because it wasn't a good book, but I had fun. Sorry to all the people who really like this book, because I know it's pretty highly rated. But yeah, it's not my scene. The next book I read in December is The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. This is the second book in the Poppy War series, and it takes place right after the events of the first book, with Rin really reeling over all of the stuff that happened in the first book with the war and what her place in it and everything with Alton. And so she's dealing with a lot in this book. and she's kind of trying to get after the Empress, who she believes caused all the events in the first book. And so in this book, she joins the dragon warlord on his side to conquer their country, to make it a better place. So I really loved this book. I thought it was so good. I liked how in this book, Rin, in the previous book, she was on the side of like the defenders, defending her home and her country from this outside invasion. And in this book, she is more of the aggressor in terms of she's joined the side of a war for people who are conquering her country. She's doing it partly because she has nowhere else to go, partly because she believes in this guy's vision, partly because she's trying to get after the Empress. But I thought it was a very nice switch in the dynamics of talking about both different sides of a war. Not that all wars are clear cut as like defenders and aggressors, but I thought that was really cool. I love that Alton wasn't there, because fuck him. I don't want to say too much because it is the second book in a series, so spoilers. But I did really, really enjoy this book. I thought the plot was phenomenal. The characters are great. I love Kite. This book, just like the last book, talks a lot about the horrors of war, and I thought Rin's journey in this one was so interesting, and I'm very, very excited to pick up the third book because like the Poppy War is just such a fantastic series. And so I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars out of 5. I knocked off a 0.5 star because this book is dark and I generally just don't like dark things. That's just me. But overall, it's a phenomenal book, and I'm very excited to read the next one. So the next book I read in December was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. So this book is about this character, Noemi, who receives like this frantic letter from her cousin who is married, has been married to this like mysterious white guy, and that the family doesn't know too much about, and she receives this frantic letter from her cousin talking about how like the walls are whispering to her and her husband's trying to poison her, and Noemi is like, what? And her father is like, Noemi, go to the countryside, figure out what's wrong with your cousin, see if we need to get her some psychiatric help and what's going on. And Noemi's like, I guess, okay, I'll go help my cousin. And then you find out that there is lots of stuff wrong with this house and the family that the cousin's been married into. So this is the first time that I have read like a horror thriller novel in years and years and years, because I am the biggest scaredy cat ever. But this book did not scare me at all, and that's because like if I had received a letter like Noemi did from my cousin that was like, my husband's poisoning me, please get me out, the house is whispering to me, like I would have fucking called a SWAT team and gotten her out of there like that. Like, rip to Noemi, but I'm different. Like this would never happen to me. So, you know, it was fine. I was not that scared. I did really, really enjoy this book. It had a great buildup of suspense in trying to figure out the mystery, and I thought it went further than a lot of like other horror novels. Not that I've read many, but I liked that it had discussions on colonization and eugenics, as Noemi and her cousin, you know, are Mexicans, and family that the cousin got married into are all like white European settlers, and a lot of what they believe in are eugenics and the master race and master family and all of that sort of nonsense. And so I liked that this book took on that further step of not just making it a horror novel, but actually putting some depth into what this book was trying to portray. And I really like Noemi as a character. I thought she was interesting, and I mean, while she made some stupid ass decisions, because like, should have gotten your cousin out of there right away, I forgive her because she was smart in other places. And I thought the suspense was really interesting and the mystery was really interesting, and so I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. I say if you like horror, you might like this. I don't know, because I don't read horror. I enjoyed it. It was a good book. 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read is Kindred by Octavia Butler. I was supposed to read Sword of Kaigon for my own voices prompt, but then I realized that the author is Chinese and the plot/world in this is more based off of Japanese mythology, and so I didn't know if it really fit, and also my copy of Kindred came in from the library, so I decided to read Kindred instead. Kindred is about this character Dana who lives in like 1970s America, and she has her husband Kevin, and Dana is a black African American woman and her husband is white. So one day Dana gets magically pulled back into the past to antebellum Maryland, where slavery is alive, and she is forced to deal with the fact that she is now on a plantation and is a black woman. She gets sent back and forth a few times in this novel, going back from the past to the future and back again, and she has no idea why this is happening. This book is a really, really good book. It talks a lot about slavery and the horrifics of it, and it's horrifying what Dana had to go through, but also what all the slaves had to go through in that time period. It's also crazy to see how but like how she adjusts to the mindset of being a slave in this time, back from when she was, you know, in the future and free. And she really had to suffer so much. It's also really, really dark. This book, I finished it in one day because I couldn't put it down. But it also like gave me nightmares, I think. I don't know. I woke up like 3 times in the middle of the night after reading this book, like, oh my god. So it's kind of horrifying. I think it's a very good and compelling read. And I also think it's an important read because this was our history in America. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It's a very good read, and I do recommend it to most people, unless you really, really don't like dark books, because it's pretty dark. The next book I read in the month of December is The Raven King by Nora Sakavic. So this is the second book in the All for the Game series. I read the first book, The Foxhole Court, way back in July, August. It's been a while. This series is one of my best friend's favorite series, and so I promised I would read it by the end of the year, and so this is the second book. If you don't know what the series is, it's about like lacrosse boys. It is about this character Neil Justin, who plays this like made up sport called Etsy, which is like violent lacrosse, and he's like on the run from the mafia, but he gets recruited into this college team to play Etsy, and so he does, and that is the team is the Foxes. And so the first book is about him, you know, coming to college, meeting the team, and trying to run from the mafia. And it was fucking wild, that book. I don't even know how I feel about it because it's just insane. Like the whole plot, the premises, crazy. And this book is pretty much the same. Yeah, this book is pretty much the same, except Neil's like slightly more open with the Foxes, and you see like the little droplets of the found family that's going to happen. But like, it's still wild. I don't even know how to talk more about it. So I ended up giving this book 3 stars. The third book in the series is The King's Men. And this book, I think, is the best out of the series. And it made me understand why people like this series so much. Although I think it's still wildly crazy that this boy is on the run from the mafia, but keeps getting up in their faces and is like, fight me, mafia. While he's playing this sport that the mafia is super into for some reason. I don't know, it's just a wild premises. But this book was better because it had good romance. I really liked the romance, and it had the found family between all the Foxes, which was really developed in this book. And so I understand why people like this series. It's fun. I do think that the third book really makes it. The other 2 are just like, not much happens besides craziness. This book has all of the like good moments in it, in my opinion. And so I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars because it was better, but it's just like, I don't know, it's too crazy for me. So overall, I think it was a fun series. I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I understand the hype and all the memes. So I finally read The Foxhole Court. So the next book I read was The Empress of Salt and Fortune. I got this for my Shelf Space Secret Santa, so thank you. This is a short story about this queen in Imperial China, told through the eyes of one of her handmaidens, the rabbit. I really enjoyed this book. It is very, very short, but they pack a lot in here. Like, the writing is beautiful, and I love the perspectives in this book. I thought it was very feminist, and I really enjoyed, like, the world and the care that the author put into just, like, such a short novella. And so I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I think it's fantastic, and I'm surprised how much people do in novellas, because, like, how do you do so much in such a short book? But they did, and it's so good. So highly recommend this book. The next book I read was Project Management for the Unofficial Project Manager. I don't really want to talk about this book. It was good. It did what it needed to do. It taught me about project management. So if you're into project management, like, read that book. 4 out of 5 stars. And the last book I read in the month of December / in 2020 was The Rise of Kyoshi by F.C. Yee. So this book takes place in the same universe as Avatar: The Last Airbender. If you don't know what Avatar is, like, where you be at, go watch it. It's one of the best series of all time. It's on Netflix, so, like, go. But this book is about Kyoshi, who's the Avatar 2 cycles before Aang. And it takes place right after the death of Kuruk, who is the Avatar before Kyoshi. And, like, Kuruk was, like, the actual worst, apparently. Like, they spent so much of this book talking about how shitty of an avatar he was. He, like, died at the age of 30 and was, like, a hot mess and super incompetent. And so after his death, his friends who were supposed to help train the new avatar struggle for about 9 years trying to locate the avatar, and for some reason none of their usual methods of finding an avatar is working. And so they finally find this person who they think is the avatar, Yun, and so he starts his avatar training. Kyoshi ends up working in his palace, in the avatar's palace, as one of the servants. Her, Yun, and one of the Fire Nation bodyguards, Rangi, all become really, really close friends, as they're all around the same age. And so obviously, we all done know that Yun is not the Avatar. We all know Kyoshi is the Avatar. And she eventually figures this out when some shit goes down. She ends up on the run with Rangi. She kind of joins this outlaw group, and ends up traveling with them while trying to master her Avatar powers that she knew nothing about. And I loved this book. I thought it was phenomenal. I thought Kyoshi's development from the beginning of just feeling like who didn't expect this power and greatness to be on her. She was very happy with Yun being the Avatar. She loved him to end up, like, being the strong, competent Avatar at the end of this book. I thought the villain was super interesting, and they did such a good job of, like, making him sympathetic and show why a lot of what he's done has been for the greater good, but also still making him a villain. I thought that was really interesting, and Kyoshi and Rangi's relationship was adorable. They're in love, and it's so cute, and I enjoyed, the outlaw group that she joined. So overall, I really, really did enjoy this book. I think the climax at the ending was a little bit confusing because there was a lot going on, but otherwise it was fantastic, and I ended up giving it 4.5 stars, and I'm very, very excited to read the next in the series, and I'm so happy with this book. I thought it was so much fun to, like, read a book in the Avatar universe and just, like, hear more about the lore, and I love Avatar. It's one of my favorite TV shows, and the comics and Korra aren't my favorite. They're not bad, but they're not my favorite things. So it's really nice to have, like, a book in the same universe that I actually genuinely really, really love. 4.5 stars for Kyoshi, and I'm so hyped to read the next one. And yeah, those are the 13 books I read in the month of December. Yeah, I'm very excited about that. So let me know what you guys thought. If you've read any of these books, I want to hear your thoughts on them. and let me know what your favorite books in the month of December were. Thank you guys all for watching. Yeah, bye.